Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started as people trickle in. But welcome to a Sandra Day O'Connor Institute Public Square conversation. Today's topic is when and why did America stop teaching civics? A few words about the public square. This is essentially a forum for civil discussion about the topic that we have. We're interested in hearing different people's opinions. Hopefully there'll be a good, spirited back and forth. And let's for sure keep it civil. That's very important to us at the O'Connor Institute. And you can see here, we've got some of our the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute. We're an organization, a nonpartisan organization, civil, collaborative, fact-based, inclusive, nonpartisan, and objective. That's what we try to do. So a few words about the O'Connor Institute. We were founded by the late Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. We have three pillars: civics education, civil discourse, and civic engagement. We do a lot of different types of work. I'd encourage you to check out our website, o'connorinstitute.org. We put on a civics camp for summer, civics camp for middle school students. We have civics education resources available. We do civics research, lots of things, and we're stewards of Justice O'Connor's home, where she raised her family. And really interesting story. That home was actually slated for destruction, and then was moved brick by Adobe brick. And anybody who's familiar with Adobe bricks knows what a painstaking process that is. And was moved and reconstructed, and is now on the National Register of Historic Places. So, okay, we'll go to the next slide. So, when and why did America stop teaching civics? This is a question that we found we were getting asked at the O'Connor Institute quite frequently. And so we actually we put out a policy brief just a few weeks ago to look at this question. And here are a few of the key findings. And I thought it'd be a good way to sort of kick off the conversation, put up some of these findings, and then sort of let our discussants kind of bandy those notions about. But yeah. First question to answer is actually did America stop teaching civics? And the answer is yes. Civics was taught much more frequently in this country with much more, shall we say, enthusiasm prior to the 1960s. And the 1960s is when we first start to see a decline in civics education, both in the quantity of time devoted to civics education in American public schools, and also to the quality might not be the best word to use, but again, maybe the word is vigor with which it's taught. When civics is taught today, what we've noticed when we were doing this research is that it's often taught with a little bit of caution. And we can talk a little bit more about why that's the case. Second bullet, civic education has not, for many decades, been prioritized by federal or state government, and the time devoted to civics declining to unintended consequences of other educational focuses. And we can talk a little bit more about this, but a great example here is really the No Child Left Behind Act of 2002, the federal No Child Left Behind Act that tied federal funding for schools to test scores in math and reading. And what ended up happening is sort of what one may have predicted, which is an unintended consequence is that as schools focused more on math and reading, they focused much less on other subjects. And civics was a real casualty there. And we can talk a little bit more, but the declines in the amount of time devoted to civics education in the years following No Child Left Behind are really significant. In some cases, civics was slashed by over 50%, the amount of time spent on social studies instruction. Third bullet here, the time spent in schools on civics declines when civics education itself is seen as controversial. This is a very important point. We seem to be in a time right now where civics is especially controversial, civics education. And probably seen that a lot in the news with whether it's a school board meeting that sort of gets out of hand, or whether it's pundits debating whether it's the 1776 project or the 1619 project. These conversations, when they tend to get uncivil when they get personal is when schools start to back away historically. And we've seen that in our research. And it is true that younger Americans are less knowledgeable about civics than previous American generations. That's true. We'll go to the next slide. And so this is sort of interesting. This is Pew has been looking at public trust in government over time. And you can see here sort of how that line has moved. We went ahead and also put into this graph sort of the generation, so you can see sort of the beginning of each generational cohort. The last generation that really got robust civics education in this country is the baby boomers. And interesting that public trust in government has tended to sort of track with declines in civics education. It's also interesting too. I was reading an article in the Washington Post just a few days ago, an old article, but I was going back and doing some research, and this was interesting to me. When asked about being proud to be an American or proud to live in the United States, there's about 3/4 of baby boomers say that they are proud to be an American. 54% of Gen X, 36% of millennials, 16% of Gen Z. So correlation, not causation. But as we've seen this decline over time in civics education in this country, it does tend to track with the public trust in government. It also tends to track with those figures that I just said. So like I said, that's just all food for thought to kick off the public square conversation. This is an open forum for civil dialogue. We want everybody to share their thoughts, to ask questions, to mix it up in a civil way. So if you'd like to join in, go ahead and raise your hand. You'll see it there at the bottom of your screen. There's an icon where you can raise your hand. And if you turn on your video, that will allow us to spotlight you, and we can sort of have those conversations. I'd be interested to know if there are people on this call, for example, who had a robust civics education in high school. Most of the people that I talked to today, students, have not. And it's interesting, the question, when and why did America stop teaching civics? We often get that question at the summer camp that I mentioned, when a grandma or grandpa comes to, pick up the kid and starts talking with us, at drop off or pick up or whatever. And this is where we get the question. So yeah, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'd like to hear from you. Okay, Mary, I see that you said you're raising your hand. Mary Stevens. Hello. I think you might be on mute, Mary.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Can.
Okay, great. So my question is really, what can we do about it? Because I had a great civics education. I'm 82, and I think it's really important. And my children are much less informed. And I think there's a difference in the political parties and their concept of what civics is about. I mean, I think the Republican Party with Project 2025 has a very different concept of what civic discourse is, what kind of country we should live in. Then I think the Democratic Party does.
Sure.
And that's very concerning to me.
Sure. And this is a great question, Mary, and thanks for asking that. And I'd be interested to hear what others say, in our public square sort of conversation. But this is a tricky thing, right? Because civics is not algebra. There is no agreed upon sort of civics curriculum. And really, what started to happen in the 1960s was, for the first time, people started to sort of ask questions about the civics curricula that had been taught in this country up until that point. And so, these differences in opinion are real. Are they intractable? I think not. We have sort of, in our research looked at some really successful, programs where take for example what is really the most popular civics course in this country, if we're just talking about students who are enrolled, which is the Advanced Placement AP US Government and Politics course. Full disclosure, I used to work at the College Board, and I had a pretty big hand in helping to redesign that course. But this is a college level civics course that has to be taught in the reddest districts of this country where they have AP classes, and it has to be able to be taught in the bluest districts of this country where they have AP classes, and it's the same curriculum. And you get credit for this course at schools like Oberlin, universities like Oberlin, or Wesleyan, very sort of a liberal kind of mentality at these schools, environment. You get credit for that course at Liberty University or Patrick Henry, universities that have a very sort of strong sort of kind of conservative tilt. So there are ways, and I should mention too that liberal scholars and conservative scholars have all signed on to the AP US Government Politics course as being sort of an absolutely a really standout civics course. So there's ways to get there, but those conversations, Mary, I think are very difficult to have. Too often, I think what happens is they sort of spiral out of control into name calling, into sort of attacks on people's motivations and character. And that is when we've seen historically that everybody loses, because schools will start to walk away at that point. American public schools, high schools, middle schools, whatever the case may be, they don't want any part of that. Teachers are not trained to be conflict negotiators. So, so that's a really interesting point that you bring up. But I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say about that as well. Sorry, Whitney, go ahead. Whitney Nolan.
Hi, I'm well. I am the assistant director of Girl State here in Missouri. And what we've noticed over the last, I've been a part of it for about 20 years, is that the generation has become mostly now not as, they don't like to get into discourse, and they don't like that conflict. So we watched our numbers, especially after COVID, kind of decline from people who even wanted to apply. And what we found is that we had to rewrite our curriculum so that it wasn't just directed at learning the 3 branches of government. It wasn't just directed at this is how you run for office. We added in business, education, and journalism, and brought that stuff into civics and showed how that was connected. And in that way, we kind of taught students how to get civically engaged, but not in the way they were traditionally thinking about it. And that kind of has helped us kind of boost our numbers, and it kind of takes off that edge, because and it's just getting a kid to go to a school board meeting, or getting them to go to a city council meeting. They realize there's more to it than what they think. And that's been helpful on our end.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I do know, from reading that this younger generation it is less comfortable, as you say, sort of mixing it up with debates in the traditional manner. And so that's interesting how you figured out a way to sort of bring them in to that. Joe. Hi, Joe. You're muted, Joe.
There.
Great.
Okay. So, Mike, I like what Whitney just said about how they're handling that in Missouri for Girl State applicants. I went in the mid 70s. I went to Boys State here in Arizona, and I had pretty robust education as far as civics, American government, and it was because of a high school teacher. This is a rural school also in Western Arizona. So our teacher was really good. He was totally into it. I think students really enjoyed the course also. The courses, I should say. But what my question is, with the AP courses that you just described, those are higher ed, those are college, right? So the question is, how do you get junior high and high school students more involved? Because otherwise, if a kid's not intending on going to college, then they're missing out on that. So you're kind of creating this whole separate knowledgeable class there, or lacking in certain knowledge there of a certain. It's a very important knowledge that all American students, in my opinion, should have. However, it's lacking. But my question is, who's teaching the teachers to do that? Is that just something that's not a priority in college level courses? Those that are teaching the educators.
Yeah, those are really good questions. Thanks, Joe. And people, when you talk, maybe we should say where we're from. Joseph said he's in Arizona, and Whitney said she's in Missouri. We're based Sandra Day O'Connor Institute, also based in Arizona, but I know we have people from all over. Very quickly, Joe. Yes, so the AP U.S. Government and Politics course, as you say, it is a college level course. However, it's a course offered to high school students, so they would get college credit for it. But to your point, the students who enroll in a course like that do tend to be students who are interested in moving on to college. And so how do we broaden that out? How do we get more people involved? That's a really great question. About educating the educators, this is something, and I'll open this up. I don't want to, I'm not going to hog the microphone here, but this is something that we hear a lot from educators. So I'd be very interested to hear what others have to say about this, is that they do not feel that they have the training necessary to teach civics today in the environment that we have right now. They just do not feel equipped to do that. They don't know what they can and can't say, what they should and should not be saying. Surveys of educators, when asked what civics courses should cover, what are the top priorities, they're all over the map. Educators think all sorts of different things. So they need a little bit more training, I think, and they would welcome that. Okay, we've got a lot of hands up. We'll go Matilda, I see yours first there. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I kind of really do agree with Joe, because we do, in my school, you do not have to take a civics class until you are a senior, and that is mandatory to graduate. But I do live in North Dakota, and a lot of people drop out at 16 to help with farms and things like that. And I feel like unless you're pursuing a higher education, unless you want a high school diploma, there's a lot of people out there not getting that civics knowledge and not getting any idea of how civics works. And I just do feel that there is a need for more of it, definitely in the lower grades, because you do not touch on it at all as a subject until you reach senior. And so I personally have yet to learn much. Most of it that I have learned has been from the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute. And so I am trying to learn more, and I feel like it's definitely something important that others do need to learn more of.
Thanks, Matilda. That's a really great perspective to hear from a student. Yeah, to your point, there have been a number of states that have made civics a requirement for graduation, Arizona being on the forefront of that. But yeah, to your point, often what happens is that's a semester-long course that happens in high school and the later grades. If you look at middle schools, there's almost no there's just not a lot of civics being taught at that level so far that I'm aware of. Maybe others know differently, but yeah, to your point. Thanks, Matilda. Okay, Abigail.
Hi, I'm actually in Tennessee, and I'm on the school board in Nashville. And I was a teacher for over a decade, mainly elementary level. So in Tennessee, in a lot of ways, we are trying to put civics into the curriculum, into standards. In elementary school, it is required starting in kindergarten you do community jobs, learning about what's going on around you. And then by the time you're really in second grade is when you're really hitting hard on the three branch government, and you're learning about those things. Of course, it is a very developmentally appropriate curriculum, so not necessarily hard hitting. And there is a civic requirement to graduate from high school that you must while you it's a semester of credit, though. It's not a full year's credit. But it is a requirement, and it's something that is started younger. However, I think what happens is people don't want to have hard conversations, what others have said, and so they back away when students that are older start to get really engaged in the process and they have questions that are beyond just, what does this branch of government do? When it goes beyond that into, is that really fair? Is that the right way to handle actually work with one another in this way? That's where you start to see teachers want to step away because they're afraid for their jobs. They're afraid that somebody's come after them and the wrong thing. And we don't tend to have that issue quite as much in Nashville, but in all of the surrounding counties around us, we really see where teachers feel like some parents will go after them if they say the wrong thing in the classroom. And I think that really.
Right. Thanks, Abigail. Yeah, you're starting to break up there a little bit. I don't know if we lost you, but I think we got most of what you were saying from Tennessee, and that was really helpful. Good context. Thanks for that. Yeah, that's it. That's true. A lot of teachers are very worried about that. About will their administrators sort of have their back if there is sort of a parental pushback. But a lot of them, before they even get to the point of thinking, will the administrator have my back? I think a lot of teachers are like, what can I and can I not say? What should be part of this course? What is allowable? And a little bit more guidance there would I think be super appreciated by the teaching community. Okay, Nancy.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm currently in Texas, recently moved from Illinois. I do teach in higher education. So I'm seeing the difference between how the states, kind of approach that. I think I was very lucky to grow up I guess my civics education started in the mid to late 70s into the 80s. And I think I felt I had a pretty good one. And I don't know if the difference is I was going through, it was actually a lot of my education was all girls faith-based school where we were really encouraged to talk about our personal values. And that's what I find. I teach a public health course now that is supposed to be, they can get their civic engagement credit at the university for that. And I find young adults have a hard time with their values clarification. They don't know how to ascribe their values to whatever direction they're going on a policy or that. So I spend a lot of time trying to get them to find the words. We do art, we do a lot of different things of just like, what is it in them that makes them feel passionate about a specific issue. In public health, there's a lot of things, especially coming out of the pandemic, that I think opened people's eyes. But again, it's not maybe just the issue, but it's like, how does that meet your personal needs? So just for the younger people, educators, I think if there's ways for us to get younger people, I know their values are just molding, but ways for them to be able to verbalize or, talk about that in a safe way, I think might be helpful.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Nancy. And that's really interesting. Of course, civics is, there's a huge philosophical component to it. And so education in that realm is important too. So that's really great. Thank you for that, saying that and bringing that up. I just wanted to mention, if you guys aren't looking, there's a lot going on in the chat too. So I know it can be tough to multitask for me, but other people are very good at it. But if there's a good spirited conversation going on in the chat, and I see Liz, is it Willen? I think, but she's the editor of an online education publication that you all should check out. And she put a link there. There's just written they're doing a project on civics, so you can check that out. And they use some of our research, which was really, really cool. Okay, who's next? Claire. Hi, Claire. Claire, you're on mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about now?
You're great now.
Okay. I live in Texas and I'm a retired history teacher. I taught mostly Texas history, and I find that most states don't have a state history. Within the curriculum is written to start at the local and state level to teach about civics, but when I started teaching in the early 80s, the district I was in was not teaching that. They were teaching only history because that's what the teachers were comfortable with. To give a little little definition to a historical perspective, I'm an Air Force brat. My father fought in World War II. A lot of my patriotism comes from that, comes from my parents, comes from being a military child and living in different places around the world. So I have unique experiences that have made me more interested in the propagation of democracy. I've observed that the generation coming out of World War II were very enthusiastic about teaching about democracy because they had just fought for it. Having fought in Europe and being afraid that that would carry over to the United States contributed a lot of enthusiasm to that teaching. But as the generation of teachers have come along, that enthusiasm has weakened. Even though we have fought wars, those wars were not in areas of the world where we felt threatened as a country.
Yep.
Now, I have grandchildren in public schools, and I do not see either the parents or the children teaching, the teachers teaching the mechanism of democracy and how it works.
Mhm.
It seems to me, and this is just my personal opinion,
Sure.
that enthusiasm to preserve what we have in this country we've turned it on each other. And there's so much contention within the country, and I feel it's because the wars that we fought in the past generations have not really affected us in the country, our lives, our daily lives.
Yeah.
There's not the enthusiasm. And so as teachers, we need to somehow acquire that in order to teach it effectively, which is one of the things that I did when I taught in Fort Bend ISD in Texas. When I started teaching and they were not teaching civics, and this was 7th grade. So it's just to let you know. And I thought and argued that instead of teaching 6 weeks about the Alamo, we should be teaching more civics. And because I had a voice that spoke up, then they assigned me to write the district curriculum to make sure that it included that civics education that was already there, but no one was teaching.
Yeah.
But I had brought with me a great enthusiasm for it.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see, and I hope I live long enough to see the positive outcome of what maybe could possibly be positive of what's going on in our country today, with people actually thinking, well, maybe what is democracy and why should we value it?
Yeah. No.
And a lot of that comes from the parents, a lot of the moral values, a lot of the ability to engage in reasonable discourse is going to come from the parents. And then when we look back at what the parents' education was, it wasn't there.
Right.
So there's a huge task, not only in history or government or civics education, but all across education and all subjects, to teach what used to be taught in the home and
Yep.
And since it isn't, we need to take that responsibility as teachers.
Yeah. So there's a lot of great points that you're bringing up, Claire. So a few things that I'll say, you know, you're correct. For sure. I mean, obviously you're correct because you experienced it and but I'm talking larger. You're right. That sort of enthusiasm for civics kind of tracks with the national mood in a lot of ways and civics education. And so I know, Nancy, you had said that you felt you got a robust civics education in the 80s. A lot of places were actually. The 80s sort of saw an uptick. There was a little bit more of an enthusiasm in this country for America in the 1980s, just generally speaking, when you look at surveys and that. And then we were also, you know, it was very, you know, Cold War was really heating up and everything. And so that's one thing to say. And also, Claire, really great contribution that you made there when you're talking about how is it that how can teachers bring their enthusiasm into the classroom to teach about, but how do they do that while also ensuring that their biases aren't sort of you know, are in check as well, you know what I mean? And so that is sort of the thing that a lot of teachers I think are having trouble kind of negotiating at this moment. But that's really great contributions. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, Jim, you're next.
Thanks so much for having this. I've learned something. I finally learned how to raise my hand at these things. I sit
was
with
the
my hand
goal.
up and no one pays any attention.
That was the goal of this whole thing, Jim, was, you know, tech education. Yeah.
I had a remarkably good education. I grew up in New Jersey, and the New Jersey public schools were really good. I had a teacher in 4th grade who had books in the back on all the founders and other important people in our country. There were probably almost all men in those days because this is very long ago, but we were allowed to borrow those and take them home. I lived just 7 miles from Philadelphia, so I saw the Liberty Bell early on, and I just think I didn't have much choice about being involved in education and civics. Eventually became a lawyer. I taught American government over 100 times, 20 years at the University of Arizona, and then I don't know how many years, 15 or 16 at the University of Virginia. And I have been distressed by this decline in civic education. While I was at Arizona, I got to know Justice O'Connor very well, and I know how much she believed in this iCivics project of hers, thought it was more important than anything she'd done on the court. And I would like you to give us a quick update on how that's going. The other thing, I've got a couple of things here on my list, but the other thing I thought about, I used to teach for 20 summers for the junior state operation, and that grew up in California to try to get kids interested in politics with clubs in schools. And it spread around the country, stronger in the Northeast, Texas and California. But it's just gone belly up, partly from mismanagement, I'm afraid, of the finances, but they're still looking to do something to participate in civic education. I was involved when I lived in Arizona in 2 different teacher institutes. We got money from the Arizona Humanities Commission and put on a week-long gathering of teachers from all levels in the Copper Queen Hotel down in Bisbee and the Civic Center. And that was a very rewarding thing, but the commission only wanted to give us money for 2 years, and it fell apart. We didn't have any other funding. The Arizona Bar Foundation had something like that, I think 1 or 2 summers. But there are things like that that I think need to be promoted. James Madison's home on Pillier. You may see there's a nice Madison picture and a little bobblehead of Madison back then. They've had a teacher get together in the summer. I think they're trying to improve that. And that's been the kind of thing I think we do need to do. I found out from that junior state program, which brought in these kids from all over the country, not necessarily members of junior state in their high school, but just kids who wanted this summer program, that these kids love talking about politics, and they particularly love finding that there are other people that thought like they did. So that kind of program of getting kids together just to talk about politics or debate things. There are always debate programs there. And I taught them a full college level American government class. Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say before I went on? I got one more point here.
No, yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that worries me the most about the situation in the country today is that we have millions of people who don't believe the same thing I do. And I think with all my level of education experience, I know what I'm talking about. I think the election in 2000 was a legitimate election. And I got a letter yesterday from one of my former students who's a lawyer who told me how all the judges collaborated in this plot to keep Trump out of office. That's a very intelligent person. We have different ideas about what truth is in the country today, and this complicates greatly the whole idea of teaching civics. And I think one of the things we need to work on in our schools is teaching kids how to determine what is truth. That becomes even more challenging with the AI entering the picture. So these are just a few things to kick around, but I applaud your efforts. I think, Justice Connor would be so happy about what's been done in the Institute and what is being done on an ongoing basis. My only complaint is that you have these luncheons. I can't afford to go them. Plus I live in Virginia, but anyhow.
We'll fly you out, No, these are good points. First of all, Nice Civics, that's another organization that Justice O'Connor started. And yeah, they do great work. And that's for, I believe, for middle school students. They have online curricula for middle school students. But as far as the idea of misinformation, yeah, this is a huge thing. And especially now with AI, and people, if you look at where young people get their news, okay, it's not the New York Times. Like some do. Some go to the Wall Street Journal, some go to the New York Times, but it's TikTok, right? And it's social media. And this is, I mean, the numbers aren't, it's not even close. And on those platforms, at least currently, there's not a great deal of sort of, I mean, it's kind of like an anything goes sort of free for all. So the ability to discern fact from fiction is key, and that should be part, right, of any not just civics education, but any worthwhile education that you're getting in high school. You should be doing that in math class and in English class and everything. But I think there are probably some deeper issues, right, too, that we could talk about as far as what happens when there's a sort of this sort of innate tribalism that is sort of played upon in large part by a lot of these sort of social media algorithms that sort of continually feed you reinforcing material to that which you already have shown that you are interested in. And so, yeah, but a lot of good food for thought there. Thanks. And also your perspective as a college professor is very interesting. I mean, we talk a lot about civics education in high schools and middle schools, but there's a lot of work. I would tell everybody, if you don't know this, there's a lot of work that's happening now on college campuses. It sort of had been the case that college campuses for a long time sort of were the place where you go to sort of like talk about how horrible American democracy is, and that was kind of the vibe. And it was, everybody was having fun. It was cool. But I think people decided like we need to sort of have a little bit more of balance here. And so there are a lot of different campuses that have set up specific schools to study civics, and not just conservative campuses either. Campuses where you would think they have a real heritage or history of sort of protest against things, but Stanford University has a center now where they're doing really sort of deep and good work on civics. The University of Florida, Arizona State is doing this, or at the University of Arizona. So this is happening in college campuses. I don't know if the University of Virginia has something similar, Jim, but you're on mute. I'm sorry.
There's a Democracy Institute that's been set up in the last couple of years in a whole new building. So
yeah, see,
they're going on.
Yeah, it's really cool to see this because it's good to have two sides, and I think that helps. Okay. Hey, Matilda, I'm gonna just hop over to you to Nancy first because Nancy hasn't spoken yet. Is that cool? Okay, thumbs up from Matilda. Great. All right, Nancy, go ahead.
Hi, this is Nancy Haas, and to Jim's point about iCivics, I worked with Justice O'Connor on iCivics way back in the beginning of that program, and one of the things that she was very committed to was harnessing the technology and teaching students where they were today and what they were interested in. So, I would like to see more schools harnessing these programs like iCivics and other technology. I put in the chat a moment ago, I'm concerned about social media and where students are getting their information. And Jim also mentioned this, whatever the, and my camera's broken, sorry, but I'm using air quotes for, whatever truth is and, what they're getting. And when I hear students, and I work with high school students, and when they say things like, well, I get all my news from TikTok. That's, because they really tell it like it is. And I'm very concerned about that with the lack of discussion in our schools today. Kids aren't getting often that other point of view, and having the ability to discuss controversial topics. I did a study like yours, Liam, in 2009, and I'll send it to you. We found the same things, and one of the things we really concentrated on was the importance of discussion, not only in civics courses, but in other courses too, and letting students get their point of view out. And that has just about disappeared. And what our study showed was when No Child Left Behind came in and civics and social studies wasn't tested, it just fell to the bottom of the curriculum priorities. So, I mean, I'm enjoying this discussion and just wondered what other people thought about the role, greater role of technology to try to balance things like TikTok. And I'm not against TikTok, but when that is students' kind of primary source of information, I'm very worried about that.
Yeah, no, it's a big worry. We actually, Nancy, we had a conversation not long ago with the executive director of the National Association of Secretaries of State. So the association of all the different secretaries of state that run elections at the state level. And they're very concerned about this too, about misinformation, about AI, about technology, being able to sort of and so they're trying to get the message out that if you have any questions about elections, you should go to your state elections website. But they're for all the work they're doing, the kids are going to be on TikTok. And so I think part of it probably is, as you point out, with is trying to meet people where they are and trying to figure out a way in which to sort of use technology, as you're saying, to sort of balance out the perspectives. No, thanks for that. Matilda, go ahead.
I've kind of been looking in the comments, and I feel like a big part of the problem is that we need to find a way to separate learning about civics from the people who are in the government, because it has almost gotten to a celebrity-like obsession with those running for office and those running for things in the government, that the opinions are almost unrelated to the governmental aspect of the rest of it. And so I feel like we just need to separate ourselves a little bit from who is running and who's doing this and who's doing that, and then the actual education portion of civics.
Yeah, Matilda, you keep, blessing us with your astute comments, because, from the student perspective, but I mean, how smart is that, right? Yeah, I mean, trying to get beyond, call it the pop culture elements of civics, getting beyond that and showing that civics is bigger than any sort of one elected representative or one sort of pundit or something like that. So important. Yeah, that's great. That's really important. So thanks for sharing that. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add? This has been a really great conversation. And thanks everybody too for the civility. We're a nonpartisan organization, and civility is super important to us. We've done some work showing that civility is also a productive. This is sort of an interesting thing. People talk about civility as sort of like a nice to have, like we should all be nice to each other, but it's actually a way to actually get things done. Go ahead, Joe.
Great discussion. So what's your opinion on what would be a good next step for teaching civics pre-college?
Are you asking for teaching civics as in teaching the students, or for teaching the students? You know, well, so in our report, we came up, we have a few recommendations, and one of them, this is kind of funny, is we actually just need to teach more civics. And you know, we put in the report, you know, that obviously that's easier said than done, but we might as well start with the saying, because there's not as much sort of that saying, but I think that's changing. My sense, and I'd be interested to hear if others sense this as well, but my sense is in this country, there's kind of maybe a gathering weariness with sort of this sort of polarization and our inability to sort of have civil dialogue, our inability to sort of understand sometimes the sort of the way in which our government works and how it works best when we're able to sort of have that back and forth. And so I suspect that, and we are seeing more and more states are starting to pass legislation to sort of say, no, this has to be a state requirement in middle school. This has to be a state requirement in high school. So the next step after that would then be, as we were talking about, really helping teachers to understand how to teach this subject. Because if you take a teacher who, often it's social studies teachers who are asked to come in and teach a civics course, a history teacher is not necessarily in his or her training going to have learned sort of how to, as we were talking about, how to navigate these really difficult conversations, and especially in the sort of current environment, and especially as some of our contributors have pointed out, with a new generation of students that is, I think, trained to be a little bit uncomfortable with having those kind of conversations. And so I think that's definitely the next step. But I think we can also learn from the places that are already doing it and doing it well. And I think, you know, again, I mean, the AP US Government and Politics course is, as we were talking about, a college level course, but I do think it can show sort of the ability to sort of balance perspectives while also communicating the essential information that's necessary to sort of have a really robust civics course. But yeah, a lot of work to do. But conversations like this, I suppose, are the beginning of that, where, you know, there's an interest. I'm looking at the chat here. Oh, great. Somebody put it in the chat. So you can go to check out some of the civics courses that we have on the O'Connor Institute website, Civics 101. And those are courses that are sort of directed more toward sort of an adult learner who maybe didn't get civics in school and wants to sort of bone up on civics. I would say also the report that I talked about is available on our website, and I'm sure we can put that in the chat too. It's at o'connorinstitute.org/research. And there you also find, we wrote a piece in Real Clear Politics about this as well. You can find links to that. And I think Liz who had put some links to the work that they had done at her publication as well in the chat. So yeah. Does anyone have anything else? Or we can wrap it up a little bit early. Give everyone 10 minutes back. Okay. All right. Well, on behalf of the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute and our sponsors, our funders, we'd like to thank everybody for joining in. We'll have more conversations like this where we kind of kick off a topic and just want to hear from you and sort of, you know, what your thoughts are and have a good discussion on it. And this was great. And I learned a lot. I hope you guys did too. Thank you.